So, up to a month before this launch party, my mother was already bugging me to write a speech. Your speech for my last launch party was so good, you have to write another one. But you should do it now, so you have plenty of time to think on what to write. Do you want me to help you? So, naturally I wrote this in the baggage claim of the Oakland airport on my way here. Right?
That's the way to do it.
My mother is not like me at all. Every piece of her writing must be planned out, every aspect of theme carefully formulated before she even begins to actually write. Even after Stolen Secrets was done, she continued to plot and plan and edit over and over and over, every bit picked apart and organized. Yeah, I love you. I somehow have the feeling that my mother and I would make pretty bad college roommates. However, even though I don't understand these foreign concepts called organization and planning that my mother put so much effort into for her book, her very same borderline psychotic obsession with detail is what makes her book such a fantastic and multi-dimensional piece of writing. Stolen Secrets is so good, in fact, that even though I've read through her edits dozens of times, and so tired of this stupid thing that I had made her shell out cold hard cash every time she wanted me to beta read. I found myself sucked into and finishing the entire novel on the plane. I got chills, and not just from the unbelievably freezing air conditioning, but from the twisted, wonderful emotional connections she creates with every layer of mystery she peels away. I knew what was coming, and still when it hit, the sheer brilliance of it astounded me. And at the very end, when everyone died from that runaway retirement home bus, I couldn't hold back the tears. Yeah, it's not that easy. This book has been waiting for over 20 years to be written. It was my mother's brainchild, the book she's wanted to write for so long, but had been waiting for until she felt confident that her skill level was worthy of such a difficult plot. And today, that time has finally come. Congratulations, Mother, you did good.
So, Annalise, I have some bad news for you. Everybody becomes their mother.
I know.
Where's my mom? My mom is here. There's my mom right there. I'll be her soon.
Have you
Well,
ever started wearing socks and sandals?
Can't you wait till the Q&A, Molly? So thank you all for coming to my book launch party. Amazingly, I'm not even nervous. I'm so excited. I thought I would be nervous, but I'm just so excited. I'm shaking from excitement because I'm seeing so many great faces out there, that people that I love and who came a really long way to be here. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come celebrate this novel with me. So, hey, that thing works.
Oh my
Oh. So my first book, Stolen Secrets, is my second book. My debut novel is called League of Strays, as Pamela explained to you. It's about what it means to be a follower, to be bullied, and to seek revenge. It's been a really long 5-year wait for the second book. I write very slowly. So what is Stolen Secrets about? Well, it's got a lot of subplots. It deals with alcoholism and Alzheimer's, caregiving issues, elder abuse, how family secrets impact future generation, Holocaust deniers, Anne Frank's final days imagine, how revealing truths and finding forgiveness can heal everything, and why we should embrace our uniqueness and not our sameness. So there's a lot going on. And technically it is a YA because it's got a 16-year-old protagonist. But personally, I think of it more as a crossover novel because I think adults will really like it. It's intense, and it's complicated, and it's mature, and it's funny, and it's entertaining. And all of these subplots, they kind of, when I was writing it, they tied themselves together into this really big ball of yarn. and then I had to slowly figure out how to unscramble and unite them so they could form something recognizable, which I think is the universal need to live our lives with truth and hope no matter what the cost. So here's a little synopsis so you know what I'm talking about. After an abrupt move across the country to San Francisco, 16-year-old Livy is shocked to find that her mother has lied to her. Instead of looking for work at a bakery, her mom is taking care of Adele, Livy's grandmother, who Livy thought was long dead. Suffering from Alzheimer's, Adele shouts out startling details, mistakes her own name, and seems to relive moments that may have taken place in a concentration camp. When Livy and her new friend Franklin D. find journal entries from the Holocaust in Adele's home, Livy begins to suspect that her grandmother may have a shocking link to a notable figure, Anne Frank. And I just want to apologize because I'm going to give one spoiler. There's just no way I can have this party without giving this away, so I'm sorry. But there comes a point in the book where Livy begins to suspect that her grandmother is, in fact, Anne Frank, that Anne Frank has never died. This germ of an idea came to me a really long time ago. Actually, Annalise, it came to me 22 years ago because I was pregnant with you when I had that. That's why I was researching, like Pamela was explaining, I was researching Anne Frank, and I saw her on the train roster, and her real name was Annalise, and I got chills, and I went to Rob and I said, I don't care what you have to say about this, I'm naming my daughter Annalise. And luckily, he was smart enough to say, okay. So I got the idea, like I said, 22 years ago, and I know you're thinking I must be really old, but no, it's not true. So the idea, though, was way too big for me. I thought it was the coolest idea, but I was, oh, hi, Paul. But I was like so afraid to do it that I didn't do it. So I kept working. Oh, hi, Bill. Oh my gosh, there's so many people here. Okay, I'll stop. I felt like my skills would not do it justice, so I waited, and 4 manuscripts later, and a debut novel later, I finally thought, maybe I'm ready. But I want to take a step back and tell you about how I got the idea in the first place. So I was driving along in the car, and I heard an interview with a Holocaust survivor, and at the time I thought she was pretty old. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, in my lifetime, there are going to be no more first-hand witnesses to the Holocaust alive. This has happened to all of us, right? We lose people, that the last people to be alive for some event, and it's kind of startling. Because that's how kids learn best, is when these Holocaust survivors go to schools and talk to them. They learn it way better than through a textbook. So I was thinking about how that would impact future generations, but then I also was thinking about how when one person dies in the Holocaust, it isn't one person, it's their entire family that would have come after them, generations of people. And I'm big into ancestry, and I can say that I look at one relative back in the tree, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of people that come after them, and it just multiplies exponentially. So I'm going to share a little story with you about my great-grandmother. So my great-grandmother, Christine, she was living in Denmark with all of her siblings, of which there were many, and they were very poor. And my great-grandmother decided that she wanted to go to America, that she wanted something better. And so she saved her money, and they were so poor it took her probably forever to save enough money for this. And then somehow she got herself over to England, and she got in line to buy a ticket on a ship to come to America. And she got to the front counter, and the person said, I'm sorry, they're sold out. And she was devastated. And that ship was the Titanic. And she would have been third class, absolutely. So I keep thinking about, if she had been there an hour earlier, there are a number of people in this audience who would not be here today. In fact, none of you would be here today. Not because you're all related to me, although DNA has shown me that many of you probably are, but because this book would not have been written for obvious reasons. So I have a scene in my book. It's called the Shabbat scene, and it's where Livy thinks that, Livy, because of everything going on, she starts to believe that maybe she's Jewish, and her mother never would tell her. And so Livy basically goes over to her friend Franklin D's house for Shabbat. And at the house, Livy asks the mother, "Did you ever know anybody who died in the Holocaust?" And the mother says, "Yes, my cousin died, and I often think about all the people that weren't born after that from her family." And so that was kind of a nod to that. So in my research for this book, one of the very first things I did was I interviewed a Holocaust survivor in person. I found him on the internet, and I just called him up and I said, "Would you please talk to me?" And of course he was willing, and I wrote down every word. I taped the conversation and I typed it all up later on, and it was incredible. So this right here is Trudy and Louis Schloss, and I talked to Louis. And Louis was just amazing. So I was horrified, obviously, at the details that he gave me, and some of them did make it into the book, even though this was over 2 decades ago that I spoke to him. One of the things that really struck me that he said was that the reason that Jewish people didn't stand up against the things that were happening to them was because in a dictatorship, you don't argue, you do. And we just don't even understand that sometimes as Americans. And then he also gave me an idea. It was just a throwaway line in his Holocaust speech, or his interview with me. He said, "Some of my friends have even gone to tattoo parlors and had their Auschwitz tattoos erased because they don't want to talk about it anymore." And that actually made the book as well. So I had a realization, though, after talking to him. And the realization was that even when the last Holocaust survivor dies off, authors and artists, we can keep the history alive through our art. That is one great way that we can make it seem as if readers are actually connecting to the storyline. Well, that realization actually was a huge responsibility. And I started to look at my book differently. And I realized there are a lot of Holocaust details in this book, and I researched every single one of them to make them as accurate as I could. So also I had 2 experts look at it. But unfortunately there is a blooper in the book despite my best efforts. And somebody who reviewed the book called me up and said, or talked to me and said, "You know, Lisa, you have a scene where Adele is wearing a paper medical gown, and they were not invented until 1963. Can you still change it?" I'm like, "No." Please don't tell anyone. So of course I'm telling the whole world. So next I saw on the internet an age-progressed photo of the world's most famous Holocaust victim, and I got instant chills. I wanted to explore the fictional possibility that Anne Frank had never died. Like, what might the circumstances have been to convince her to hide her own death, to become someone else? And what would it take, what would happen to the world if her secret was one day revealed? Most people know that Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Frank, is a very popular book, and it's been printed in 67 languages, 30 million copies sold. But I want to read aloud Anne Frank's quote because it's a little hard to read up there. "Look at how a candle can both defy and define the darkness." I'm going to read that one more time. "Look at how a single candle can both defy and define the darkness." And I realize that's also what a good book does. Anne Frank was 13 years old when she was forced to hide in the attic apartment behind her father's business. She hid with her family when her sister Margot got summoned to work duty at a work camp. Soon 8 other residents crammed in. And I'm just curious, how many people have been to the Anne Frank house? Yeah, that's a fair number. It's a very moving thing, so if any of you are ever in Amsterdam, I suggest you go. They stayed in hiding for a little over 2 years before the German police found them. And from there they were sent to a camp called Westerbork, which was a work camp, and they broke apart dusty, old, grimy batteries from dawn until dusk. And that would have been a great place for them to have stayed. And unfortunately, because they were found exactly when they were found, they were in time for the last train to Auschwitz. If they had been 1 month later, they would have been okay. They would have all lived, I'm pretty sure. The sad fact is that of 1.3 million people who went to Auschwitz, 1.1 died. And interestingly enough, Anne Frank's father lived through that. It's easy to see why she might think that he had died. Anne and Margot never saw their father again after Auschwitz. They were separated by gender. And then Anne and Margot were sent to Bergen-Belsen, and their mother was not allowed to go because she was sick. And their mother actually passed away in Auschwitz. Anne and Margot survived for a long time there, well, a long time in those standards. But then they died a few months before liberation, both of typhus, a few days apart from each other. I think they gave each other strength, and when one went, the other went. So the age progression, here's what we think that Anne Frank may have looked like at age 80. This was created on her 80th birthday.
Wow.
It's pretty cool, huh?
Wow, that's
In Stolen Secrets, she's 88. So this book had a real ticking time bomb for me because she's 88. So like I couldn't sell this book in another 10 years or another 15 years. I had to sell it soon or it wouldn't be contemporary anymore. So as mentioned, there are many other subjects besides the Holocaust in this story. One inspiration was my stepfather, Tom. He died in 1999, and he inspired Livy's mother's character of Gretchen, who is not like Tom, was well-intentioned but clueless, self-involved mother. Tom also, he inspired a few different characters. It's interesting because Gretchen in the story has an AA sponsor named Tom. And Tom's, yeah, now you get the link. And Tom, in the story, his doctor had told him that if he had one more drink, he would die. This is exactly what somebody said to my stepfather, and my stepfather immediately checked himself into rehab and never had another drink again. Also, as a nod to this great AA sponsor in my book, my stepfather Tom became a really good AA sponsor, and he changed many lives. Unfortunately, ultimately, he got a form of dementia that is a lot like Alzheimer's. It has the same symptoms. And I actually found that disease to be both fascinating and tragic. It was fascinating because the memory issues were so interesting to me. Here you had the ability for him to remember long-term things that happened before he even met my mother, and yet he couldn't remember something told to him 20 minutes earlier. And I was very intrigued by that. And then also he had personality changes every day. It was like a different person. Every time I would see him, it was a different person. And those things really always stuck with me. And it served my story so well with Adele because obviously if she was completely together, she would just tell everybody what her secret was. But she had Alzheimer's, so she couldn't really communicate it. And so that forced Livy to unravel the secrets one by one. So while I was writing this, something wonderful happened, and I call those synchronicities or signs that I'm on the right track. And they're weird things that keep happening with every book I write. But in this case, I was working on a scene where Adele, the grandmother, and Livy's grandmother, Livy discovers a poem that Adele wrote many years before she had got Alzheimer's. And that poem was about the Anne Frank's chestnut tree, which shows up 3 times in her diary. Anne Frank's chestnut tree became a symbol of hope and a metaphor for freedom for Anne Frank and for readers afterwards. But in real life, the tree fell. They tried to keep it up as long as they could, and there was a big storm, and it crashed to the ground, and it was on my birthday, 2010. That's one, but that's not the surprise. And luckily, the Anne Frank house had a brilliant idea, and they took some branches, and they made 11 saplings from them. And they put them up to the world, and they said, please send us the reason why you want them, and we'll consider it. Well, it turns out that one of those winners of the saplings was Sonoma State University. They had to quarantine that tree for 3 years. They were required to make sure it didn't have any diseases that could be brought over and hurt our plants. So one day they had an article in the paper and they said, yeah, we're quarantining it for another year, and then we're gonna have an event and we're gonna plant it. So I immediately got on the phone and called up the dean at Sonoma State and said, I'm writing a book. Can I come and see the planning ceremony? Because I really have to be there. No, really, I promise this book will be published. I promise. She said no. She kind of said in like a not a very nice way that there were VIPs coming to the party. Not enough room for me. But she really did know how obnoxious and how persistent I am. I kept calling her, I kept writing her. She kept saying no. And finally I was like, oh, okay, I'll try again like closer to the day. And I went out to my mailbox one day, and in my mailbox was an invitation. And it was for me and a guest to attend the Anne Frank planting. And my guest, as you can imagine, was Annalise. So, this is the Erna and Arthur Salm Holocaust and Genocide Memorial Grove. It's huge, and it's all devoted to the Holocaust. What's funny is that Annalise and I got in the newspaper. This is from the Marin IJ. It's not really that funny because we're hands, and so anytime we see anybody with a camera pointing in our direction, we go. Yeah, she is too. So that's Annalise, and I didn't even realize that I'm in the picture in the background taking a picture, but somebody just pointed that out to me. So I don't know, I'm going to show you something that my critique partner, Shannon, who couldn't be here today, she went back to this to see the tree just last month. This is 4 years later, and this is what it looks like now. Can you believe this tree is going to grow to be 80 feet tall?
Wow.
So finally I wrote the whole book, and I finished it and I revised it, and then I found just a couple months ago that lovely thing, and I'm sorry it's blocking your view. This lovely thing was something I wrote 20 years ago. It was a plot chart for this book, and it doesn't even like vaguely look like this book. There's some character named Nick I've completely forgotten about, who apparently was an intern at the New York Times and was going to reveal all in the New York Times. And then there was a character named Rachel who was abused by her boyfriend, who had to learn to stand up against him. And then Adele was not Libby's grandmother, but Adele was just some woman down the street that she got assigned to for a Holocaust project. So a lot has changed in the 3,023 times I've revised this book. So, I have some good news too. Oops. Well, I'll get to that in a second. So the book got 17 rejections before it finally sold to Boyd's Mills Press. 2.5 years later, it waits patiently for you all to read right back there. And the good news is, the U.S. Holocaust Museum has just told me that they're going to carry it in their shop. Thank you. I'm asking 8 others to look at it because I figure I can leverage that a little bit. And hopefully, because we work together really well, because our goals are the same, which is to reach teens, and we just have a really good synergy with our goals. So right now I feel like as a society, we all need to work together. I feel like we live in scary times, and that hate groups are more vocal than ever. This is a hate map. These little dots each represent a major hate organization in our country. And California is ranked number 3 with the most, 79 hate groups behind, behind New York and Texas. Sorry. In California though, in Southern California specifically, not Northern California, so you don't have to worry about it, there are 3 groups that are specifically geared towards the Holocaust, denying the Holocaust ever happened. So I have a scene in my book where neo-Nazis are referenced as coming to San Francisco, and they do some damage to some synagogues. And way back when I wrote it, I remember going to my critique group and saying, I don't know, it feels a little fake, like neo-Nazis would never come to a little city like San Francisco. And I remember we all debated it, and it was kind of one of these things I was like, oh, I'll just let an editor decide if she wants to cut it or not. Well, now with the book's release, of course, it's sort of a prescient situation, because just last month, as some of you probably know, a hate group came to San Francisco. They wanted to protest, and 1,000 organizers showed up and protested and scared them off, and they never came. So that's what they get for messing with San Francisco. So like Charlottesville, as we've learned, when hate is allowed to flourish, tragedy can happen to both our bodies and to our collective spirit. This hate map was created by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were founded in 1971, and I have been so impressed with their mission. They fight hatred and bigotry. They seek justice for the most vulnerable members of our society. They track hate groups. They litigate for the victims. And they inform law enforcement of hate group activities. In addition to this, they go into the schools and they educate kids on tolerance and accepting each other. Their work is supported solely by personal donations. In the year 2017, despite progress that's been made to our society to become more accepting and inclusive, I feel we still have a long road to go. I'm sure a lot of you agree with me. For this reason, I feel it's important for me to do my part to help the organization whose mission it is to root out bigotry. To this end, I'm going to donate $3 to each book bought today to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So I hope you'll join me and consider buying books for your school classrooms or your neighbors or your nieces and nephews. And now I think it's time to read. And I still have my voice, so I think we're good. I was gonna have a real New York actress read it for you, but I'm too much of a ham to give up that role easily. And even though I'm losing my voice, I'm gonna try to get through it. I think I sound sexy. Okay, this part that I'm gonna read to you. Well, just one second. This part I'm going to read to you has two POVs, a contemporary and a historical. They're intertwined in the story. The first one is the historical one, and it belongs to Adele, Libby's grandmother, and it takes it from the time that she is found at Bergen-Belsen up to the end of the story. May 1945. Everyone used pretty words to scrub away the scum of war. She implored him to return on 3 separate occasions. Each time he did, she asked who he was. On the 4th visit, she fixed those brown eyes on him and said, "Hello, Mr. Friedman." He smiled, telling her, "My name has never sounded better." The American soldier was older than her, somewhere in his 20s, and she thought he found her attractive, although he kept his thoughts to himself. "You aren't as thin as the others," Herbert commented one day. It took her a moment to compose a response. In broken English, she said, "I was in a camp hospital. A nurse gave extra rations sometimes." "A Nazi gave you food?" Herbert said incredulously. "I can't believe it." "Well, perhaps she didn't want me to die on her watch." These soldiers were so simple-minded, Adele thought, viewing everyone as either good or evil when the world was much more complex. "There's a decent heart in most of us," she wanted to say, "if you'd only open your eyes." Herbert's jaw had tightened. He didn't agree. She knew it. He'd seen the damage firsthand, the destroyed lives, the rotting corpses. He was incapable of finding humanity in the soul of a beast. And yet he didn't try to change her mind. He didn't argue. He kept his feelings to himself, tucked away where they belonged. In time, she felt a spark in her chest, as if her heart had cracked open the tiniest bit. One afternoon, Herbert brought her a gift. She pulled the Star of David necklace from a bed of cotton. The single overhead bulb caught the tiny diamonds, casting a shiver of light across her hand. She thanked him and politely returned it to the box. Later, she discovered that people wouldn't ask difficult questions as long as she wore the necklace. No one dared resurrect the trauma. From then on, she never took it off. In this next scene, Livy's brought home a friend, Franklin D. Schiller, to meet her grandmother. Grandma insists that everybody call her Oma. Adele suffers from dementia and violent memories, which Livy wants to better understand, but she hasn't been successful in finding out much from her own mother. "Love your home," Franklin D. told her. "Edwardian, right? Awesomely antique." Oma's head swung to him. "I most certainly am not an antique." "Well, I bet you weren't even born when this house was built," he said. "That makes you a spring chicken." Oma lowered her chin and batted her skimpy eyelashes at him. Was she flirting? Franklin D. and I traded smiles. He offered Oma his hand. I'm Franklin D. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Freeman. Oma, she cried. Oma, he repeated. Her coy look switched to wariness. Franklin Delano was chums with that nasty Winston Churchill. Well, actually, I was named after my great-grandfather, Franklin Douglas Schiller the Great. Oma cocked her head. You're a Jew? Well, I told you he was Jewish, I said, embarrassed by her abruptness. Well, so am I. I wear a Jewish star on my coat, she said. Franklin D. seemed to take her dimension in stride. I hear we don't have to wear those stars anymore. Oma stilled like an animal hearing a lion approach through the weeds. Quiet! Those nasty bastards are coming! Who? I asked. The ground is frozen and my feet are bare and that guard might pull out her whip. She reached under her sweater for the necklace and tilted her head. Do you know where my shoes are, dear? They're on your feet, I said. And my necklace? Have you seen it, Livy's friend? It's around your neck, I said, stroking her arm. It's okay, Oma, you're safe. Not that one, the other one, my pearls. Where are my pearls? Oh no, not this again. What do they look like? Franklin D. asked. I moved behind Oma and shook my head, hoping he'd get the message. Don't ask, divert. They sneak in during the night while I sleep, she whispered, her fingers clawing at the throw pillow. They steal my jewels for money. I shot Franklin D. a look. What did I tell you? Following Oma's logic was like trying to track a shooting star. What was it like in the concentration camp? Franklin D. asked gently. I winced. That kind of question could send Oma into a rage. I was in the hospital and I was so sick. Hey, my voice works with that line. She grabbed her throat. The dramatic choking sound sent Franklin D. from the room to retrieve a glass of water. Oma twisted her head away, refusing it. She looked on the verge of collapse. Why had I brought Franklin D. here? But then she slid a hand around his arm and she tried to pull him toward the bookshelf. He glanced over his shoulder to let me know it was okay. Sorry, I mouthed. Oma reached for the middle of the second shelf. She pulled out the Hunchback of Notre Dame and flipped through its pages, then discarded it for Ivanhoe. On the third shelf, she grabbed hold of the scarlet letter, shook it out like a towel at the beach, and threw it behind her. It hit the wall and slid to the floor, the spine broken. Oma, stop it! She started moving quicker, tossing books off the shelves. Franklin D. hopped out of the way to avoid being hit by the Dickens anthology. When Oma reached for Sense and Sensibility, her hand moving in for the kill, I grabbed her wrist. I have to find it, Oma cried, ripping her hand free. She pulled Wuthering Heights off the shelf and sent it flying like a frisbee. Dust flew from its pages. Find what? Franklin D. asked. Look for my journal, she pleaded. I moved in front of the bookshelf, blocking her access. Gretchen's in my way, damn it, she said with a scathing glare that made me step to the side. You have a journal? Franklin D. asked her. On the shelf? The nurse hid them, so no one will get in trouble, Oma whispered. You're Jewish. I want you to take it back from me. Take it where? He asked. Where it belongs. My eyes darted to the bookshelf. If a journal really existed, it could tell me things I thought were lost to time. I could learn more than the tattered scraps of the past that Alzheimer's had left behind. Franklin D. said, Sure, I'll look for you, Mrs. Freeman. Sorry, Oma, I mean. He turned away so he could wink at me without her noticing. I moved out of his way, relieved that he was handling the situation. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, Oma echoed. He pulled a book off the shelf and flipped through the pages for anything unusual. He fanned through the pages of each book. Second shelf from the bottom, I cut some of this. A scrap of paper floated out from Pride and Prejudice. Franklin D. handed the leather-bound book to me and bent down to retrieve the old page. I held the book upside down, and 3 more sheets of paper slipped out into my hand, each a few paragraphs long and written in a foreign language. I went back to the beginning to check for more, but didn't find any. Read it! Oma's tone made those 2 innocent words sound like expletives. We can't read it, Franklin D. told her. It's in another language. Dutch, Oma said. Can you read it to us? He asked. She stared at the papers in his hand, her lips pursed with disapproval. Can't. Don't know how. Alzheimer's, late stage, loss of ability to read. Not the kind of fact I wanted in my head right now. My hair is falling out, Oma whimpered. Irma says wash outside or you'll die, you dirty Jew. She snaps her whip and calls her dogs. Who's Irma? I asked. But this question, like all the others, earned me a blank stare. The war is over now, Franklin D. said. What if they come back? Oma asked. He turned his thumbs to his chest and sucked in air, puffing himself up like a superhero. I'm a big guy, which means I'll kick their ever-hating Nazi butts, okay? Now I have a special favor to ask you, all from me. This quote from Anne Frank, which she's done about 50 famous quotes, is, dead people receive more flowers than the living ones because regret is stronger than gratitude. So I want to do some thank you myself up here. When a book takes 22 years, oh, well, wait a minute, actually. Let's look at it. There. When a book takes 22 years to write, it's really important to the person that people read it. So I'm asking each of you that if you do read this book and if you like it, well, even if you don't, you can be honest, it's okay, or maybe not, to post it on Amazon or Goodreads or even the independent bookstores, things like that, because your opinion really counts, especially to me. It really helps the book out and lets other people know that they should read it. So thank you very much. I'm not done. So I won't thank everybody because there is a lot of people to thank, and you can just read it in the acknowledgments page. First, I want to thank Book Passage for hosting, Claire Dornbos, who coordinated the event, Pamela Livingston, who did such a lovely job introducing me and Annalise. Me and Annalise? Annalise and I? Annalise and me?
Annalise and me.
Something like that.
Annalise and me.
Annalise and me. I need my daughter to help me.
Yeah.
Being that one person in the corner.
Exactly. Now, much of Stolen Secrets was actually written here in this cafe, as are all my books. So this place is really special for me, and it's always the first place I want to come do a launch party. I also want to say thank you to my wonderful critique group. They're represented by these two beautiful women. We call ourselves the Ladies of the Book. We started more than a decade ago, and sometimes we're each other's best friends, and other times we want to hurl sharp objects at each other. But the truth is that they helped me so much with this book that they deserve to be on the byline. But for now, a thank you will have to do. So the people in my group are Allison Burka, yeah, raise your hand. Elizabeth Shreve, and then due to illness and book tours and other things, Shannon Ledger, Darcy Rosenblatt, and Amanda Conran. Interesting coincidence, Darcy Rosenblatt's debut novel came out just a few weeks before this book came out. So we are really excited about that, and I hope you'll check out her middle grade book. It's called Lost Boys, and it's about a 12-year-old boy who fights in the Iran-Iraq war, and it's incredible. Now, both books have subject matter that's fairly deep. However, that doesn't stop us as critique partners from reveling in the serendipity of our mutual publication dates. In the lonely world of writing, no writer exists without community. A thank you goes to all my writing friends, you know who you are, including the talented attendees at our annual writing conference, Better Books. Also, the team from SCBWI. Hi, Colette. That's our leader back there, our fearless leader. Your workshops and retreats have inspired me and kept me going, word after word after word, so thank you. And I'd be remiss not to mention the very best cooks in town. Carol Lacoste back there, homemade those rugula they're fantastic, you have to try them. She made them each by hand. And also Isabella Hostrup, where are you? Isabella, I don't know where, oh there she is, she's being shy. Isabella made that fantastic cake. It's mimosa pineapple custard cake. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you guys so much for doing that. And also my daughter here, who despite not being 21, somehow knows how to make the best sangria in town. We don't question, we just like drink. I'm really happy at my friends that came from far away. Some of you drove a really long way. Some of you had to make a lot of arrangements to get here, which I really appreciate. And the furthest ones are Vivi and Amy. Amy is my college roommate. They came all the way from New York. So I'm really happy to have them here. And I don't know if Aaron Bortel is here. Well, Carrie is. Carrie is his wife. Aaron Bortel was an expert who advised me, and he actually appears on page 131 with his full name intact. We kept thinking that it was going to get cut at some time, and you know the little disclaimer at the beginning of the book that says this does not represent any real true people. That's just not true. Because Aaron Bortel is the very best DUI attorney in the state, and hopefully you will never need to see him. A heartfelt thank you, of course, goes to my publisher, Boyd's Mills Press, and to my wonderful and devoted editor, Mary Colgan. Both my daughters helped edit my book. Julia, the voice of the teen committee, polices every word to make sure it's authentic teen speak and that none of my 80s lingo creeps in, which it always does. Julia's not here today because she is taking her junior year of high school abroad in Italy, and I miss her very much, but I figure it's a pretty great excuse. And luckily I have her friend Riley over there videotaping to stand in her place. Thank you, Riley. A warm thank you goes to Annalise, who's read the book more than once or twice. That's an understatement. She's always willing to let me read a page or two out loud, even if she's heard it 30 times before, because I'm excited about one word that I changed. She also served as my marketing director for this book, and she created cool swag. So I couldn't have done this without you. I really appreciate all your help.
I love you too. Although you hate me, so.
I only paid you after the 30th revision.
That's fair.
And I want to thank my sister, Beryl, and my father, Martin, for sharing their feedback on early drafts. And also a special thank you to my mom, Kay. She helped so much with an entire draft, read the whole thing aloud. We read the whole thing together, and she gave me a lot of great feedback. And she also bought me this awesome dress. I also want to thank someone who is no longer with us, my mother-in-law, Janice. She read and edited every word I wrote and was the biggest cheerleader ever. Stolen Secrets was the last project we worked on together, so I will really miss her with future drafts. And finally, a huge thank you to that man standing way in the back with his arms crossed. My husband, Rob. He's been very supportive and encouraging, and he lets me read every page out loud to him, even while he's sleeping. And I want to say thank you to my fabulous guests. So there's a giveaway. So everybody look under your chair. And whoever is nearest, because I think this chair might be empty of all the weird things, whoever's nearest to a chair that has a leg with a ribbon tied to it, raise your hand. Harry, you won! Yay! Harry, what you won is a trip to the, no, sorry. Your very own Stolen Secrets bag. You can use it when you shop. And a $20 gift card to Book Passage. Thank you. So, I'll give it to you later. So if any of you are like me, you're really pissed off right now because you didn't win. I have to win everything or I sulk for days. So no one leaves empty-handed at my party. So Livy discovers through the story that she might very well be Jewish. And Franklin D. gives her a pair of glasses. They're very special glasses. When you go back and have some of that lovely cake back there, you'll find your pair of glasses. And I want you to take them and come back and look at all of these lights up here and watch Christmas morph into a little bit of Judaic heaven. So I'm going to sign some books right now. I hope you'll stick around for food, sangria, snacks, arugula, and amazing cake, and enjoy the company of all these awesome fellow literary types. But before I go, I have to read you my daily horoscope, because I just saw it when I was walking out the door. A brief get-together with someone you haven't seen in a long time will prove interesting and will inspire you to take on new challenges. So you all totally are inspiring me to take on new challenges. Thank you for attending.